Hello, everybody. Good evening. Shalom. Really, my apology on the delay. I'm not talking about the 10-minute delay. I'm talking about the 2,000-year delay. We're a little off schedule, but better late than never. And can you all hear me? If the people in the last row, if you can hear me, just raise your hand. Good. You can hear me. Okay, good. And there are seats here close by. Anybody wants? There are laps here you can sit on. Tonight, I'm going to be trying to speak a little bit about what I deal with, what I do, why I do it, why, in spite of what happened to me, why have I not learned my lesson, why I don't think enough is enough. That's pretty much what I'm here for. Most people who prepare their lecture, and they're sure that their lecture is about the most important topic in the world. It's natural, that's what most people think. But in my case, it's true. Yeah, I'm a very modest person. Yes, I am. Okay, anyway, in my case, it's true. And therefore, for the first 8 to 9 minutes, I'm going to try to convince you that tonight's lecture is the lecture on the most important topic in the world. And that's my first part of my lecture. And then I'm going to try to talk a little bit about what I do. I'm not world's champion archaeologist. I'm not world's greatest Talmid Chacham scholar. So I'm not going to have here any great new news of probably most of the things I'm going to say are probably not even new to any of you. But I'm going to try to give you a little bit about my feeling and my emotions and my intimate connection to the topic we're talking about tonight. And it's not about the Olympics. I'm just to those of you. Okay, we're talking tonight about Har HaBayit, Beit HaMikdash. So as I said, the first few minutes just going to try to convince you about what I think, about why I think it's the most important topic in the world. Very simply, we know the Torah is not very generous in words. Those of you who have ever studied a page or two in the Gemara know that the Gemara deals, why is this word here? It's extra. Why is this word here? Why is this letter? Why this letter? And etc. etc. And the Torah is not very generous in words. And therefore, most of the mitzvot of the Torah are covered with one or two psukim. I said it's going to be in English tonight, but I actually don't speak English. I speak. It's a very weird language. It's called Hinglish or Hebrewish, or it's a funny language. So if anybody prefers me, instead of saying psukim, to say verses, I'll try. It's not my mother tongue. My mother tongue is that I don't speak Hebrew, I don't speak English, or we speak something there in the middle. It's called Ivrish or Hinglish, or you can change. Anyway, so the Torah usually does not elaborate in such long descriptions about different mitzvot. We even have one parasha where there's more than 70 mitzvot in one portion. There are a few mitzvot which are basic, foundation, infrastructure of Judaism, where the Torah really goes and elaborates about and spends many psukim. For instance, Shabbat. Shabbat, from the very beginning of the Torah, we have Vayechulu, and then you have the 10 Commandments, and then the man that doesn't fall down on Shabbat, and then you have the portions of the Mishkan, and the Moadim, and the Musafim, etc. So the Shabbat takes around probably 60, 70 psukim in the Torah. Halachot of Kashrut, we have in Parashat Shmini, Parashat Re'eh. There are a few others, Isurei Achila, Chadash, Orla. You also get to like 50, 60 psukim. Then there's the mitzvot of Arayot, which appear in Nachrimot and Kedoshim, also something like 70 psukim. You have Kashrut, we spoke about. You have Mitzvot Ben Adam L'Chavero, that's like a big one. That goes like 110, 120 psukim. When it comes to the Mikdash, the Torah has more than 1,000 psukim of the Torah deal with mitzvot, referring to the Mikdash. And here, the Torah goes on and on and on and on. Each and every one of the vessels of the Mishkan, what it's made of, its size, where it stands, and each one of the vestments of the Kohanim. And after the obligation to make them comes afterwards with when the actual preparing of these vessels and the vestments. The Torah repeats and says, he made this, he made the menorah, he made the table, he made the aron, he made the mizbeach. Instead of just saying, Moshe did exactly what he was told to do. And then we go on to the korbanot in Parshat Vayikra, the korban olah, korban mincha, korban shlamim, chatat, asham. And then we go home, and then we come back the following week, Parshat Tzav, as if nothing happened this whole week. Because again, olah, mincha, chatat, asham, shlamim. And the same thing happens when it comes to korbanot nesi'im and the korbanot musafim. And then we come to Sefer Dvarim, which we just beginning this week. And we have Hamakom Asher Bachar Hashem L'Shaken Shmo Sham 20 times. So actually the Torah is trying to tell us God created the world, and the last word in the portion dealing with the creation of the world is the word Asher Bara Elohim La'asot. He wants us to do, and what does he want us to do? Ve'asu li mikdash. And our whole mission in the world is to make a mikdash. And all the other mitzvot are like details in this major. I agree, you're right. All the other ones are details of this story. Now, the same thing continues. By the way, I got back a scoop. How do you say scoop in English? Scoop? Okay, from behind the scenes. When God, before he created the world, he called all of his advisors, all the malachim, and he said, listen, guys, I have to ask a question. I need your advice. I know Am Yisrael, they're wonderful people, but sometimes they get lazy a little bit. And I have a feeling, if I tell them, make me a sanctuary, make me a mikdash, make me a temple, I'm afraid they're going to say, what God actually means is that he will throw down the temple from the heaven. What can I do to make sure nobody ever thinks some kind of weird thought like that? So the Malachim said, well, no problem. In the portion dealing with the Mikdash, write 100 times the verb ve'asita, and you'll see nobody will ever think that a Mikdash is something that falls down from heaven. God said, listen, guys, you don't know Am Yisrael. 100 times is far from being enough. We'll do it 250 times. So therefore, in the portion of the Mishkan, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wrote 250 times the verb ve'asu, ve'asita, 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 ve'asita. I'm not going to do it 250 times. And therefore, ever since then, nobody in the world ever thinks that a mikdash is something that falls down from heaven. I'm sure. I'm pretty sure. Anyway, that's the story. Because the whole concept of a mikdash is not that something falls down from heaven. Just like HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't do all the mitzvot, he wants us to do it. The whole concept of there's nothing that contradicts the idea of a mikdash more than a thought that a mikdash is something that falls down from heaven. And therefore, every single one of the Rishonim, without exception, counts the mitzvah of building a mikdash as a mitzvat aseh. Mitzvat aseh, for those of you who don't know, are commandments that human beings are obligated to do, not God. They're obligations that human beings are obligated to do. Those are mitzvot aseh. Anyway, back to what we were talking about before. The same thing goes on in the Nevi'im. We see the book of Samuel begins from the destruction of Shiloh, concludes with King David purchasing what's called Goren or Nan HaYevusi, which from now on we'll call Har HaBayit. And then the book of Melachim, the book of Kings, begins with the build-up of Shlomo, where then his main project, he builds the Beit Mikdash, and then from there on, we start going down, and the kingdom breaks into two, and then the final chapter of Melachim is the destruction of Beit HaMikdash. It goes on into the books of Nevi'im, prophets, we see they're all warning. If you continue what you're doing, Beit Mikdash is going to be destructed. Most famous in that fashion is Jeremiah, Yirmiyahu, but the other ones speak about the same thing. And then we go on to the books dealing with the rebuilding of the second temple. Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi, Ezra, Nehemiah, they're all talking about, Haggai says, guys, come on, what are you waiting for? Go ahead and build. And Koresh, the declaration of Cyrus, he says, those of you who want to go and build, go and build the temple. And this is what they're all talking about. So the Tanakh itself also, if you take out the portions of the Torah that deal with Beit Mikdash, you're left with nothing. 50% of the Torah. The same thing happened when you refer to Torah Sheba'al Peh. Of the 6 tractates of Mishnah, 2 of them are 100% Mikdash, Kodashim and Tarot. But the others are also Moed. What does it talk about? Yoma. What does it talk about? 7 chapters of the Parsha talks about what the Kohen Gadol does in Yom Kippurim in Beit Mikdash. And the 8th chapter describes what we're supposed to do. Well, you're not fasting, dry ride your bicycle, fast, and not do other things besides that. Anyway, the same thing happened in Masechet Pesachim, Shkalim, Chagiga, Bikurim. 50% of Torah Sheba'al Peh also around Beit Mikdash. To a point where Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, after the temple is destroyed, he says, oh my gosh, there's not going to be any more Judaism. What do we do? And he sits and he decides to give us various different takanot, very different mitzvot, that we should remember to say, yes, don't worry. Judaism can continue without a Beit Mikdash. The same thing happens when you refer to almost anything in our life. A couple gets married, we break a glass, reminding us of the Beit HaMikdash. You build a new house, you leave part of it unpaved, reminding yourself about Beit HaMikdash. You eat a piece of delicious chocolate cake. Baruch Hashem, ala michya, ala kalkala, ala tnuvat hasadeh, ala mizbachecha, ala echalecha, uvnei Yerushalayim. What is that connected? I'm eating a piece of chocolate cake. What does Yerushalayim have to do with it? Probably most of the ingredients are made in China. But anyway, but no. The same thing refers to, we're going to be fasting on Sunday, Zecher LeBeit HaMikdash, Zecher LaChurban. 100 years before the destruction of the first temple, a greater catastrophe happens to Am Yisrael. 90% of the people of Israel are sent to exile. 10 Shvatim, 10 of the tribes were sent away by Sancheriv, the Assyrian king. Take Gush Katif and multiply it by 20. Not a single fast day was established to remember that occurrence. But 4 fast days Chazal gave us to remember the Churban of Beit HaMikdash, the beginning of the siege, the entering to Jerusalem, the destruction of the temple itself, the effort to establish a new leadership. What I'm trying to point out in this introduction is to point out just one very important thing. The temple, Beit HaMikdash, is the core, the center of the entire Torah, the entire Judaism, the entire what Jewish life is all about. Now, why am I trying to emphasize this? Because very often, when I speak to people about a temple, they say, look, a temple is not really a Jewish value. That's paganism. It's, in India, in Tibet, they have temples. Judaism, temples, not really something very Jewish. Maybe in the primitive times. But now we are developed. We're in the times of enlightenment. And temple is not part of Judaism. And therefore, those people, when it comes to Tisha B'Av, they have a great celebration. It's a holiday. Because so far, luckily, we were redeemed from those primitive behaviors. But no. In the Jewish calendar, Tisha B'Av is considered the saddest day. We sit and cry. So apparently, according to the basics of Jewish tradition, the Beit HaMikdash is the center of it all. That was the first few minutes I tried to convince you that this lecture is about the most important topic in the world. But since we live in a democratic country, and I'm very liberal, you all have a right to be wrong and not to agree with me. But that was like the introduction. And now we'll start with the second introduction. The lecture itself is like 5-10 minutes, okay? We're just gonna go through like 3 or 4 introductions, and then it's a 5-10 minute lecture. Every single Jew, yes! Okay, we wake up in the morning, and the first thing we do, we say, Modeh ani lefanecha melech chai v'kayam shechazarta bi nishmati bechemla. Thank you, Hashem, for giving us our soul back, for giving us our life. And here we are once again. And then we thank Hashem for giving us clothing, malbish arumim, for giving us eyesight, pokeach ivrim, etc., zokef kfufim, everything. Shasali kol tzarki. At the end of that Modeh ani, we say 2 very important words, which are probably the most important words in that whole sentence. Rabbah emunatecha. Rabbah, before being a Reform rabbi, used to be another word, we used to have another explanation. Rabbah emunatecha means God has a lot of trust in us. He believes in us. Why did he give us our life back? Why does he actually, once again, decide to return our soul to our body that morning? Because he really trusts that we are going to use that day and use that life and fill it with so much significance, with so much meaning towards our life. And that's what the whole thing is all about. Rabbah emunatecha. Hashem, thank you for really giving me a chance and really believing in me that I will do the right things today. But I think, just like we thank Hashem for everything, clothing, for food, for children, for light, for everything, the Gemara says that the happiest person in the world is a person who has a bathroom near his table. These are things we take for granted. Most of the people here that I know, most of my friends have a bathroom in their house. Really? I don't know if you know. Most of my people, many of you people also probably have it. But these are things we take for granted. We usually get used to things very fast. We take them for granted so much. And Hashem says, no, when you wake up in the morning, thank Hashem for the very fact you have life. But we are always we get used to things very fast. I don't know if you know, but 20 years ago, if I would have told you that I have a piece of plastic in my hand and I can hold it and talk to the other side of the world, not only talk to the other side of the world, I can actually send a movie to somebody in Australia and we can watch a movie together, it would have been sounded pretty much magic. I'll tell you another story, a story that happened to me 2 months ago. True story. If I would have told it to you 10 years ago, it would have been 100% science fiction. I woke up, and my mother and my wife woke up that morning. We decided, listen, we're calling our boss, and we're saying, listen, we're on vacation today. We want to go for a trip. We sent our kids to school, and we said we're going out to have a day of fun together. Where are we going to go? What do we want to see? So we take that piece of plastic, and we put on it flowers up north. Tuk, tuk, tuk. Megiddo, okay. We get into the car. Listen to this. That piece of plastic, he starts talking. Go 100 meters straight. Then turn right. Turn left. You will arrive there at 8:47. There's a policeman on your right side. There's a car standing on the left side. It's a true, you don't believe me? It's a true story. At 8:47 sharp, we were there. And there were flowers there. Believe me, if I would have told you that story 10 years ago, it would have been science fiction. Today, if God forbid, what's called Waze makes a mistake or is not working, we go crazy. You're going to have a chance, your kids are probably going to tell their children that their parents lived in a time before there was Waze. They're not going to believe it. They'll probably say that my parents lived in the crazy time where cars had drivers also. But okay, but these are things but believe me, we get used to these things so fast. And Hashem teaches us, no, you don't take things for granted. Thank Hashem for everything you have, every single thing you have. And one of the greatest things that we have the luck, the privilege of living in the greatest event in the history of mankind. The greatest event in the history of mankind. There has never, ever been a nation uprooted from its homeland and returned back home. Never. Not talking about 2,000 years. Not even after 20 years. Not after 2 decades. Any nation that was uprooted from its homeland disappeared from the face of the earth. And here we are, 2,000 years later, we are back home in our homeland. We have returned to the places, the geographical places. We use the language. Those of you who've learned the language yet. We use the language. The culture. Everything is connected to what was here 2,000 years ago. Is there anything more wonderful than that in the world? Well, there is one more thing that's more wonderful than that, and that is the fact that this whole event is described in the Torah 3,000 years ago. In the book of Dvarim, Hashem says, at first, you guys are really going to get me mad, and I'm going to scatter you around the world, and eventually, wherever you'll be, I'm going to bring you back home. And here we are back home. I want us to understand this. What is the greatest event of the Torah? The greatest event in the whole Torah? Yetziat Mitzrayim. The return of the Jewish people to Eretz Yisrael in the 20th century is 10 times greater than Yetziat Mitzrayim. How long were we in Egypt? 200 years. How long were we in Galut? 2,000 years. From how many lands did we return from Egypt? 1. From how many lands did we return now? 150. How far is Egypt from Israel? A few hundred miles. How far is Ethiopia from Israel? A few more miles. Probably 25,000, 30,000 miles. How far is Brooklyn, New York from Israel? How far is San Francisco, Argentina? South Africa. Where do you get to when you dig all the way down, straight down ahead? What? New Zealand? Guys, Baruch Hashem, we're back home. And when we study the stories of Yetziat Mitzrayim, and it says, the Shifcha, the servant, she saw more than Yechezkel. Each and every one of us in our lives saw more than what Prophet Yechezkel saw in his life. And we have to thank Hashem for that. But in our days, miracles begin from human initiative. And therefore, in the 19th century, there were a handful of very peculiar guys. And they had this crazy idea that the Jewish people will have a land of their own. It sounded pretty crazy. Not only did it sound pretty crazy, the mass majority of the people of Israel knew that these people were crazy. The Haredim were against them, the Reform were against them, the Socialists were against them, the Bonds were against them. Everybody, it was a crazy idea. You guys, what do you mean you're going back to establish? You know what it means to establish a country, establish an army, establish water system, establish roads. It's not the shtibel. It's a state of your own. Taxes. Yeah. Baruch Hashem. Even these people themselves, there were certain points where they understood it was a mistake. In 1903, Zionist Congress number 6, Theodor Herzl himself tries to convince the people, guys, listen, we were a little off. We had some kind of megalomania. We thought we have to be realistic. You know, there's an intifada going on now in Kishinev, and things are not as good as they're expected. And things are getting tougher, and we need to find a realistic solution. I have a wonderful solution. It's called Uganda. It'll be, we're just going to, not permanent, Temporarily, we'll go there for like a century or two, and immediately we'll come back home. But the majority of the Sixth Congress in 1903 supported Herzl. 278 of the candidates supported Herzl, 175 were against it. And they were about to reach a decision that were accepting the Uganda program. Even the Mizrahi supported it. You know why? One of the rabbis of Mizrahi, I forgot his name, got up and gave a speech. And he said, listen guys, you know, Uganda is really a good solution. You know, if we go to Israel now, we're going to have these crazy problems. Shemitah, Truma. You know, it's a good solution. It'll solve all our problems. Let's go to Uganda. The other group, those who were against the plan, what were called the Tzionei Tzion, got up and said, you can't make such a decision. We have to think about it. Anyway, they postponed the decision for a few months. Theodor Herzl passed away a few months later. And the Uganda decision was accepted. Not only was it accepted, it was implemented. Do you know that? You don't believe me? Okay, let me tell you a story. There's a small little town, country actually, 50 states. It's called the United States of America. Many of you may have heard of it. There are many Jews there. They haven't been living there for 2,000 years. In the beginning of the 20th century, the end of the 19th century, the majority of the Jews from Europe did not come to Palestine. They went to Uganda on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. And they called it the United States of America. You don't believe me? I'm telling you, it's a true story. My MA is in Jewish history. Anyway, that's a true story. People don't believe it. Uganda really happened. It didn't happen in Uganda. Probably there are a few more advantages to the United States over Uganda. Anyway, though that's what the people of Israel chose. But 50 years after the first Zionist Congress, there was an establishment of the State of Israel. There was this old man, short old man, bald, with this hair on his hide, and he had what's called, I don't know how you say it in English, but in Hebrew we say chutzpah. He had the chutzpah when the President of the United States himself, a person by the name of Harry Truman, told him, don't you dare. And he dared. And he dared, and he declared the State of Israel. 1948. In the first year of the State of Israel, 6,000 Israeli Jews were killed in the War of Independence. You know what 6,000 is? 1% of the population. If what happened, chas v'shalom, in numbers of today, imagine 70,000 Jews being killed today, chas v'shalom, in 1 year. 6,000 Jews, the very first year of the establishment of the state, were killed. This year we went through a very terrible year, terror. 41 Jews were killed. 4 of them personal friends of mine. 2 of them, one living on the one house next to me, one living in the other house next to me. Daphne Meir on one side, Michael Mark on the other side. So I'm not, each one of these people is a great loss. And 41 Jews who were killed is terrible. But we're far, far, far from where we were 70 years ago. Anyway, the State of Israel was established, and in spite of the fact that 6,000 Jews were killed, nobody, or at least most of the leadership of Israel, didn't think it was a mistake to declare the State of Israel. And they continued, and Baruch Hashem, more and more Jews started coming back to Israel. But then 19 years later, the State of Israel was facing a major catastrophe, a new Holocaust. We were surrounded by 200 million Arab Muslims who were determined to wipe out the State of Israel. Our foreign minister, Secretary of State, Abba Eban, was running around the world begging the peoples of the world, please help us survive. There were those who had a little special kind of humor, and they were saying, well, the last one, please not forget to turn off the light in the airport. I'm sure many of you have heard of the place called Kikar Rabin in Tel Aviv, which was earlier called Kikar Malchei Israel. But I'm not sure that many of you know, when was that plaza built? It was built in 1967. Listen carefully. To prepare for the 100,000 graves we will be needing in the upcoming war. That was the feeling. That was the realistic perspective. Baruch Hashem, somebody, or not a body, someone, the one, up there had other plans. Baruch Hashem, within 6 days, we managed to overcome our enemies and each and every one of our borders. And not only those on our borders, even Iraq participated in the war, though we had no border with them. And Baruch Hashem, on the very first day, we wiped out the Egyptian and Syrian Air Force. And within 6 days, we were back to places which today, once again, we take for granted. I'm going on to a tiyul to the Golan Heights. We couldn't go to the Golan Heights. I'm going on a tiyul to the Marat HaMachpelah. You couldn't go to the Marat HaMachpelah. And Baruch Hashem, we returned back to the heart of the land. What do I mean, the heart of the land? Before I found this weird job I'm doing right now, I used to be a tour guide. And very often I guided Christian tourists. And they would usually tell me, I'd ask them, why did they come to Israel? And they had different stories. There's a variety of different kinds of things here. And it's a holy land. And you have the high Hermon. And you have the low, deep Dead Sea. And there's only one place in Israel. One place in the whole entire state of Israel that you can see from the same place, the Hermon and the Dead Sea. You know where it is? It's called Mini Israel. That was just like to make sure you guys are awake? Okay, good. It sounded like people that are awake. Okay, good. Anyway, back to where we were. Most of these Christian tourists would always tell me, you know why we came to Israel? It's the only place in the world where I can hold my Bible in my hand and I can walk in the footsteps of what happened. I can go visit Mount Carmel and meet Eliyahu Hanavi. I can go in the footsteps of King David. I can follow Abraham from Beersheba through Hebron to Yerushalayim. I can go to see Shiloh. I can go to Jeremiah, to Anatot. I can go visit Amos. I can actually see and walk in the footsteps of the book. And I usually would tell them, listen, guys, that's true, but you actually missed the entire point. It's not the only place in the world where you can see what was. It's the only place in the world where you can hold the book and see it happening in front of your eyes. Any of you ever travel on the road between Tel Aviv and Yerushalayim lately? Bridges, trains, roads that are being built. Does anybody here not realize and see that those are the words of the prophets, that all the nations will be coming and streaming towards Jerusalem? Anybody who doesn't feel that must be probably blind. Because everything's there. It's describing. Zechariah says there'll come a time where children will be playing in the streets of Yerushalayim. I'm sure one or two of you probably saw once in a while Jewish children playing in the streets of Jerusalem. Elderly will be walking with their staff in their hands. When Yeshayahu said that all the peoples will be coming to Jerusalem, you have to understand, Jerusalem was the size of the city of David, 40 dunam. You know what 40 dunam is? Very small. Not only that, now you guys are going to have to believe me. When Yeshayahu said that all the nations will be coming to Jerusalem, it was even before the Wright brothers. There were no airplanes. Can you believe it? And Yeshayahu said all the nations are going to be coming to Jerusalem. Not only that, all the nations at the time were idol worshippers. Why the heck would they want to come to hear and learn about the God of Israel? Most people at the time, in their entire life, didn't move more than 20 miles. That's what it was in those times. But he said that all the nations will be coming. So Baruch Hashem, as I said, we returned to Hebron and to Shechem and to Shiloh. And of course, the peak of it all, we returned to Jerusalem. You know what was here 50 years ago? You went to Ben Yehuda and you wanted to go to the mall in Mamila, you couldn't go to the mall in Mamila. Besides the fact that it wasn't there yet. But you couldn't go to Jaffa Gate, because if you would, you'd have to first of all climb barbed wire. And if you did that afterwards, you'd have to know how to confront a bullet in your head from a Jordanian soldier. Those are two things, two small obstacles, which were a little difficult to us. Yes, the city of Jerusalem, right over here, there was a barbed wire. On the other side of Derech Hebron, you couldn't go there. I don't know how they went to the Yes Planet, but they must have had ways to go. Anyway, that's the end of my second introduction. And now we're getting close to the final lecture. Baruch Hashem, we came back to Yerushalayim. We came back to the old city of Yerushalayim. And we came back to the peak of it all. The peak of it all. I know that Gabi was a very fine man, and he even gave out a piece of paper. I think he did. Gabi, you did it? You didn't? Okay, you didn't, but okay, eventually you will. You can pass them around. Yeah, you can pass them around, yeah. Anyway, there's one place the Torah refers to, Hamakom Shebachar Hashem. It's called, in the Torah, in the Tanakh, Tzion. Those of you who use the bencher and says, Rachem Hashem Elokeinu al Yisrael Amecha, the nation is called Israel. Va'al Yerushalayim Irecha, the city is called Jerusalem. Va'al Tzion Mishkan Kvodecha. What is Mishkan Kvodecha? The place where your divine presence rests. Tzion. That's what it's called. Tzion Har Kodshi. There's one place where God chose, and yes, in the middle of that 6-day war, all the walkie-talkies or whatever they had at the time sounded, Tachanot Talmid Kan Kod Kod, Har Habayit Biyadenu, Ani Chozer Har Habayit Biyadenu. The Temple Mount in our hands. And every Jew around the world couldn't ignore the change in history. The Temple Mount is in our hands. The Temple Mount, known as Mount Moriah, Mount Zion, the core of everything, was in our hands. But then came along the defense minister of Israel and decided, who needs that Vatican? Who needs it? And what did he do? The following week, bulldozers came and wiped out, we're talking about after the war was over. They wiped out 110 houses in a neighborhood called the Mugrabi neighborhood. There were 110 families living there. They were all evacuated from their houses. The whole place was wiped out. Have you ever been to the Mugrabi neighborhood? It's better known today as the Western Wall Plaza. Why did he do that? What reason? The people living there were innocent people. They did not take part in the war. They had nothing. There was no reason in the world to do that. There was actually one reason. There was a decision to change Jewish history. You always thought for 2,000 years, for 4,000 years, that the holiest place in the world is Temple Mount, where Shlomo built the first temple. You are wrong. From now on, Temple Mount is not a Jewish venue at all. It is a Muslim venue. From now on, you Jews have only the Western Wall. That small alley is no longer a small alley, it's a big plaza. And it's not only an alley, from now on it's a synagogue, and we're going to put a mechitza in the middle, and we're going to turn it into a synagogue, and it's going to be the holiest place in the world for the Jewish people. We're going to even put 3 signs that say this is the holiest place for Jewish people. And you guys are from now on going to forget about the Temple Mount. You're going to forget 2,000 years of history. Now you think I'm a little exaggerating. I'm going to try to convince you that I'm not. First of all, personally, I've heard many times various different people saying, just like Mota Gur said, the Western Wall is in our hands. Mota Gur never said that. By the way, Mota Gur told me personally that you will never see any pictures of him at the Kotel because he doesn't go to the Kotel, he goes on to Har HaBayit. But anyway, when organizations such as Yad Ben Tzvi brings tourists to visit Jerusalem, and there's a very popular tour called Jerusalem of the Three Religions. They will take you to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and they will tell you about the 4th century church, holy for the Christians. They will show you the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock, which has been holy for the Muslims since the 7th century. And they will show you the Western Wall and tell you this, for the past 50 years, has been 2,000 years the holiest place of the Jewish people. Not only that, if you Google the Western Wall, it will say the only most ancient remnant of the temple. Now that sentence is 100% true, except for a few little changes. It's not the only one. It's not the most ancient one. It's not a remnant, and it's not of the temple. Aside from that, the sentence is 100% true. It's not the only one, because the temple had 4 walls, and they were all destructed except for 4. The eastern, the western, the southern, and the northern. They were all there. It's not the most ancient, because the most ancient is on the east. It's not a remnant. A remnant is, I have a piece of paper, okay? This is a remnant of my piece of paper, which means I have something left over. The Western Wall is not a remnant. The whole entire 488 meters long and 60 meters deep are all there. They're there. Even though when you go to the Western Wall, you see only 60 meters long and 30 meters low, there are another 30 meters in there. It's there, it's standing 100, and those of you who want to see most of it, you can go into the Western Wall tunnels and you can walk along it. So it's there. And it's not of the temple, it's of the Temple Mount. But still, I think the Temple Mount, or the Western Wall, excuse me, is a very special place for the very first fact that it's the most active synagogue in the world. Millions and billions of people, of peers of people praying there. But if the people of Israel would have gone to Uganda, it would not have turned Uganda to become Eretz Israel. The fact that people are praying at the Kotel does not turn the Kotel in to the holiest place of the Jewish people. There are halakha rules that refer to what is called a holy place. There is one holy place for the Jewish people, and that's called the Temple Mount. It's even more holy than the Uman. I hope I didn't get in trouble with anybody here. But not only that, a few years ago, I went up to the Temple Mount, as I do very often, and there were, lately, the last few years, the Army, the IDF has been taking soldiers to visit the Temple Mount. And I wanted to hear what the guide who was guiding the soldiers tell the soldiers. There was a young female guide, and she starts at the beginning. She says, guys, listen, let's sit down. In the 7th century, there was a very special person, very unique person. When he was 32 years old, Angel Gabriel met with him, and not this Gabriel, different angel, taught him the Quran, and he taught it around, and he spread around the religion, and he had a very special horse, a magic horse with wings, who went up to heaven. And this is the place where it happened. From right, do you see the Dome of the Rock? They built a dome over that rock, and that's where he went up to heaven. And a few years later, El Walid built the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and that's for 45 minutes. That's what she said. She finished. I walk over to her, and I said, madam, what's your name? She says, Dana. I said, what organization do you work for? She said, I'm Kehillat Chinuch, IDF. I said, tell me, did you ever hear of Avraham Avinu, David HaMelech? I said, you know, those are Frumies. Did you ever hear of Mota Gur? Did Did you ever hear of the 6-Day War? You were here 45 minutes with soldiers from the IDF. All you had to tell them was about Muhammad. I was sure she would say, I'm sorry, you're right. That's not what she said. She said to me, Mr. Glick, I know you. There were people that knew me even before Mu'atas Khajazi made me a famous person. Anyway, she knew me. Not like you, I don't have an agenda. I don't have an agenda. I'm a tour guide in Jerusalem. I guide in the Christian quarter. I talk about Christianity. I guide in the Jewish quarter. I talk about Judaism. I even talk about the temple. When I guide on the Temple Mount, we talk about Islam because it is an Islamic venue. Which means, I'm going to translate what she just said to me. She said to me as follows. If you want to give an objective lecture about the Temple Mount, you speak about Islam. If you want to give if you want to talk about something you don't want to be objective, you have an agenda, then you can talk about Avraham Avinu, about King David, about King Solomon, about the different kings of Judah and Israel. You can talk about Nebuchadnezzar. You can talk about Koresh and Sheshbatzar and Zerubbabel and Ezra and Nehemiah and the Hashmonaim and Titus and Adrian and Bar Kokhba and the Ayyubis and the Fatimids and the Byzantines and the Crusaders and the Mamlukis and the Ottomans, the Ottomanic Emperor, and the Israeli and the British Mandate and Israel. That's called a lecture with an agenda. If you want to be objective, you talk about the Temple Mount and Islamic. That's what she said. But it's not only she said that. A few years ago, I was guiding a group on Mount of Olives. I'm sure many of you have been already to Mount of Olives, and you know what you see there. I was guiding a group of Christians on the Mount of Olives, and there was a funeral there. It was evening, and there was a funeral there of a couple of Chabadniks who were killed in Mumbai. You probably remember that, Gabi and Rivki. So I participated, and I was there, and the funeral was happening. The funeral was like 2 or 3 days after the terror attack happened, and buses of Chabadniks, of Lubavitcher Chassidim from all over the world were pouring in to the funeral. From the airport directly to the funeral. A group of them get off the bus and approach me, and they said to me in Hebrew, Slicha atam mipo. So I said, yeah, ani mipo. Yeah, I'm from here. And he says to me, Eifo hakotel? Guy, you're standing right in front of the holiest place in the world. You're standing in front of Har HaBayit. And you're looking for the kotel. I don't know if you guys can see it even. It's like a matchbox on an A4 piece of paper. This is the Har HaBayit, 144 dunams. And over here, there's a small little rectangle, which is the kotel. This is Har HaBayit, 25 times the kotel. And he was looking for the kotel. In 1967, there was a decision that the people of Israel should stop referring to the Temple Mount and start referring to the kotel. Okay, getting exciting here. Okay. You knew from the beginning that the light was going to go short? No. Okay. Anyway. Okay. Now I finished my third introduction, and now we're going to begin the lecture. What do I care? So the Jewish people now pray at the kotel instead of the Temple Mount. First of all, as I said before, my master's is in history, and I believe that it's important to tell people the truth. If we had a heritage, a 2,000-year heritage, 3,000-year heritage of the Temple Mount, why should we change it now to the kotel? But that's only a minor issue. There's a much greater issue, which in my eyes is the most important one. You know, there's a thank you very, 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 very much. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol niyeh b'dvaro. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei nefashot rabot, hakol ma shebe'artz, baruch Elohim. So, there is something that's called a Chil Hashem. We, religious people, use it very often. We say, if a religious Jew crosses the street on a red light, it's a Chil Hashem. If the rabbi is talking Lashon Hara, it's a Chil Hashem. I even once heard somebody give a speech to a group of young teenage girls, and she said, if a religious girl doesn't look good, it's a Chil Hashem. I'm not sure. I wouldn't promise about anything about that. But the Torah specifically says what a Chil Hashem is. In the Torah, a Chil Hashem, listen carefully, you know what a Chil Hashem in Torah is? It's a Chil Hashem. It's even the same gematria. Chil Hashem, the Torah specifically says it's a Chil Hashem. What does that mean? It says, if you swear in my name falsely, you are desecrating my name. Because God's name is truth, emet, lo tishavu b'shmi l'sheker, v'chilalta et shem Hashem Elokecha. Or, if you pass your children in front of the Molech, God teaches us that every human being was created b'tzelem Hashem, and if you bring your son, that's called a Chilul Hashem. I don't know in the world, is there any greater Chilul Hashem? If a place which God says, Bachar l'shaken shmo sham, He chose to rest His divine name there. And the place, instead of being a world center for peace, for calling in the name of one God, a place which promotes no more war, lo yisagoyel goy cherev v'lo yilmedu od milchama. Instead of that, the place there became a world center of incitement, terror, hate, violence, calling to kill people. And not only that, it's done in the name of God. Allahu Akbar means go ahead and slaughter Jews. I don't know a greater Chilul Hashem. And now it's not happening in Gaza. It's happening here in our capital, in Jerusalem. And not only it's happening in Jerusalem, it's happening in the place where God said, I chose, this should be a world center for peace. A world center of a house of prayer for all nations. This is the place where all nations will be calling in the name of one and only God. El Chai, a God of life. This Chilul Hashem has been bothering me for several years. And therefore, a few years ago, I got up and I established an organization called the Temple Mount Heritage Foundation. Certain times it was called Haliba. Thank you so much, thank you. Somebody did that already. Sorry, no, I'll tell you. Thank you very much. In a few seconds, when I deserve the next one. Thank you. The concept was to teach people about the heritage of Temple Mount. And I started talking about it. Now, when I first went up to Temple Mount the first time in 1989, there were like 100 Jews who would send to Temple Mount. There were maybe 2 or 3 rabbis who supported it. And that was all there was. When I established the Temple Mount Heritage Foundation, and I started the activity towards Har HaBayit in 2005, there were 5,000 Jews ascending annually to Har HaBayit. Baruch Hashem, in 2015, we had 20,000 Jews ascending. Baruch Hashem, the numbers are growing. And I've been talking about it and trying to advocate the importance of realizing, first of all, the centrality of Har HaBayit. Before ascending, just first of all, trying to understand the centrality of Har HaBayit, trying to uproot that brainwashing of 50 years. A few years ago, I approached the rabbi of the Kotel. I said, can you please put a model of the Beit HaMikdash on the Kotel? He said, no. I asked him, you know what, put up a sign that will say the direction of tefillah should be towards the Holy of Holies. What he said to me is, no. In our days, the Kotel itself has its holiness. I don't know what the origin of that concept is. I really don't know. So I started calling people to go up to the Temple Mount. And Baruch Hashem, more and more people have been coming. And I also I renewed a day called Vav Cheshvan, which the Rambam, 851 years ago, wrote a letter to his son describing his visit to Israel. And he said, on the 6th day of Cheshvan, I ascended the Temple Mount. And I think that that day should be remembered, commemorated in our family in the next generations. So we did that. It's already 8-9 years that we've been doing it every year. We've been celebrating Vav Cheshvan. 2 years ago, a little less than 2 years ago, a year and 10 months ago, we had a wonderful evening in Begin Center, not far from here. We had like 300 people. It was really a wonderful evening. We had a rabbi speaking and members of Knesset speaking and different people who were teaching about things that happened that year on Har HaBayit. And it was a really wonderful, moving evening, where at the end of the evening, at 9:30, I approached Chizki, who was the reporter for Channel 7, or Arutz Sheva, the international news. I asked him, you broadcasted this event live. It's so chaval that only the viewers of Arutz Sheva saw it. I wish the entire world would have heard about this event. And Baruch Hashem, within half an hour, HaKadosh Baruch Hu listened to my prayers. And half an hour later, at 10:04, after everybody had gone home, we finished the mingling, and we were there, just two of my friends, Moria and Shai, and my wonderful, wonderful wife. She went to get the car, and she brought the car to the gate of the Begin Center, and we walked out, Moria and Shai were together with me, and we were carrying things to put in the back of the car. And my wife was on the phone talking to a friend of hers whose son had gone through surgery that day. And so we put the stuff in the back of the car, and we turned around to go bring the next pile. And then this guy comes over to me on a motorcycle. He stops right in front of me. He's wearing a white helmet. He's all in black suit. He has black, very trimmed beard. And he stops right next to me, and he says to me, I'm very sorry, ani nora mitztaer. I didn't know who he was. Sephardi, Ashkenazi, religious, non-religious. I had no idea who the guy was. In my first thought, I thought this guy must be a Haredi, Sephardi. He wanted to tell me what he thinks about what I do in the Har HaBayit. I said, I'll go listen to what he has to say. So I get close to him and I approach him, and we're standing right next to each other. And he says to me, you are an enemy of Al-Aqsa. He takes out his pistol and he shoots from 1 foot away, 30 centimeters, 4 bullets to the center of my body. Shai and Moria run towards Emek Rephaim. They start yelling, Pigua. They're sure he's going to shoot them also. And my wife hides under the steering wheel and she yells to the phone, they just shot Yehuda, please go call an ambulance. And she hides there on the steering wheel. She's sure she's going to be next on line also. But he didn't. He drove home. And I don't recall that I had any pain, but my hand was like crushed because my hand was over here. So one bullet went here, went in here, came out of here, went in here and came out of here. All the other bullets went directly to the center of my body, and I was bleeding, and my hand was like crushed. And I managed to walk my way like 20 meters, and then I collapsed on the sidewalk. Maria and Shai saw that he ran away, that he drove away. They ran back to me, and Maria says to Shai, look how pale he is. And Shai says, yeah, we just witnessed murder. You go take care of Yafi. Yafi's my wife. I'll take care of Yehuda. And so Shai gets over to me, rips my shirt off, and he sees the bullet holes. He's trying to take care of them. He calls a friend of his who's a paramedic who guides him exactly what to do. And then he yells into my ear a sentence which I will never forget in my entire life. He says to me, Harav Yehuda, don't go, we need you. Al telech, anachnu tzrichim otcha. And then I pretty much caught on that I was pretty much my life was in danger. And slowly I lost conscience. Baruch Hashem, I personally got treated by all the medical systems in Jerusalem, Hatzalah, Magen David Adom, Shari Tzedek, Hadassah. The only Zaka didn't get an opportunity to take care of me. That's good. Yeah, and even though they do a wonderful job, but I'm happy they didn't. Anyway, Baruch Hashem, I arrived at the hospital. I was considered a critical situation. My blood pressure was going down. I was bleeding all over, and they were I went through that night. I went through like three different kinds of surgery that night, and the next 9 days I went through another 6, total of nine different operations that I went through. But that night I was really going down. There was a point where some of the doctors were already about to give up, but others didn't. I'm going to make a long story short, just to let you in on it. At the end, I survived. No, it's not funny. It's true. I'm alive. That night, the Shabak, the Israel security system, investigated my wife, all the other people, Shai and Maria, and all the other people, and they took away all the cameras from the area. And at around 4 a.m., they pretty much knew who the guy was. They went over to his house. He lived not far, Abu Tor. They knocked on his door. He understood who it was. So instead of saying, "Who's there?" he went up to the roof. He took out his pistol, the one he used against me, and he shot towards the policemen. One of them was very lightly injured, but he didn't know that there were 4 others waiting on the roof for him, and they helped him say goodbye nicely from this world. El Malay Rachamim, Tachat Kanfei Dud Hashemesh, and he was there. Baruch Hashem, he's dead and I'm alive. I'm not sure whether he got up there what he was promised. I think they said he didn't supply the merchandise. Anyway, but Baruch Hashem, he's dead and I'm alive. And once again, talking about things that we don't take for granted. In the history of the state of Israel, we have not gone through very many assassination attempts. We've gone through terror attacks, which are like something random, but assassination attempt where somebody who's specifically targeted and they collect the intelligence and they really aim at the guy and they get to the guy. In all the cases that I know of assassination attempts, the assassin succeeded in what he wanted to do. We're talking about Rabin, Gandhi, Kahana. There were a few others you may know, Gilad Zar, Nati Ozeri, Yair Har Sinai. There were different people who were targeted specifically. I'm the only one that I know that survived an assassination attempt. And as a matter of fact, I checked it out. I don't know of any others. Anyway, personally, after 10 days, I woke up and they were disconnected from the various different machinery. And after a total of a month, I was released from the hospital. And I went through rehabilitation. And Baruch Hashem, I'm back a little. I'm missing part of my lungs, part of my intestines, but basically, I even received a letter. You know, when I grew up, my mother was very an optimistic person. She was always very optimistic. Whenever we would fall down and have a wound on my knee, she would always say, "Baruch Hashem, it could have been much worse." That's the mother I grew up with. She's a wonderful mother. So therefore, when 2 months ago, I left Bituach Leumi and they gave me a note that said I have 53% nechut, disability. I went back to the lady and asked if she's willing to give me a different paper that says 47%. Well, she refused. I don't know why. Anyway, really, Baruch Hashem, I feel that Hashem personally came over to me and really embraced me and picked me up. And when Chas v'Shalom somebody dies young, we say that his mission was over. Baruch Hashem, I feel that Hashem felt that my mission was not over. And I really understand that I don't even have a privilege of not continuing the mission, of bringing people back and telling people that the Temple Mount is the world center for peace, world center of calling in the name of Hashem, is the world center, and it's the main holiest place for the Jewish people. And Baruch Hashem, we really succeeded. I mean, in the past 2 years, really, Baruch Hashem, we've trained 200, a little less than 200, tour guides at the Temple Mount. We put out a book in Hebrew and in English and in Russian, a guidance book about the Temple Mount. And then, 2 months ago, God showed me that he also has a good sense of humor. Yehuda Glick, a member of Knesset, is one of his better ones. One day I get a phone call. Shalom, it's Yuli Edelstein speaking on the phone. Listen, I got to tell you a secret, but don't tell anybody. There's a Likud member who said that tomorrow he's resigning from the Knesset, and you're going to be a Knesset member next week. It really was a shock. I want you to understand that when I signed up to be representative of Yehuda and Shomron on the Likud list, I promised my wife there is no chance in the world, no chance whatsoever, You don't believe me? It was quoted in Yediot Achronot the next day. In all the polls, the Likud had somewhere between 19 and 22%. There was one very good poll. Coincidentally, it was in Yisrael Hayom. We had 24 seats. There was no chance that number 33 on the Likud list would become a member of Knesset. Ladies and wives, don't trust your husbands. All of you, don't trust the polls. Not when it comes to Israel, not when it comes to any other country, and I'm not getting involved in any other politics in any other country right now in the world. But anyway, not even in the British decision about whether they're going to disconnect from the European. Anyway, Baruch Hashem decided he wants me in the Knesset. I really don't know what he wants me there, but I'm praying to Hashem. And listen, he accompanied me, and he really has helped me overcome various different challenges. And I guess he wants me there. And there also, I'm speaking up about Har HaBayit. The only difference is that before I was a member of Knesset, I was invited to speak, and people would pay me 1,000 shekel to give a lecture. And today, I'm not even allowed to take that money from anybody. So Baruch Hashem. But don't worry, I'm okay. Don't worry. I ate supper tonight. I'm okay. Baruch Hashem. Anyway, back to Bemet. I'm trying to get the point across. Those of you who want to come up to Har HaBayit, Baruch Hashem, there are more than 300 rabbis who support it. And today we're talking about, I don't know if there's any other thing in the world that Rabbi Dov Lior and Rabbi Benny Lau agree upon. I don't think there are other things that Rabbi Riskin and Rabbi Dudkevich and Rabbi Rabinovich and Rav Meidan and Rav Re'em HaKohen and Rav Tzfanya Drori, and really, there are 300 leading rabbis, at least in the modern Zionist world, that support ascending Har HaBayit. And those of you who want to are more than welcome. There are, Baruch Hashem, today, there are guides, and there are women who are guiding Temple Mount tours. There are students who are guiding Temple Mount tours. Those of you who don't want to send to Har HaBayit, for psychological reasons, religious reasons, political reasons, national reasons, whatever you want, at least get the concept and remember that the center, the holy place, the Tzion that we've been waiting for 2,000 years is Har HaBayit. And ascending, and that should be here in the center of your head, because it really is a place where we believe. Now, Mele, those who in the 19th century had this crazy idea of establishing a Jewish state, they never saw anything before. We, in the past century and a half, have seen that sometimes crazy people have good ideas. Not always. But Baruch Hashem, years ago we were referred to as really peculiar. Today we're in the mainstream. And I really think, looking at what's happening here in the past century and a half, to be an atheist, you really need a lot of faith. Because it really is, it's a wonderful thing. And the process is continuing. And the return of the Am Yisrael to Har HaBayit is already there. So those of you who want to join are more than welcome. It's not very difficult. Men, you're welcome to ask your wives what you do before you go to the mikveh. It's very simple. You clean your ears, you cut your nails, you wash your head, you wash your hair. It's really not something very difficult. And then you go to Har HaBayit. You purify yourself in the mikveh. You purify your heart. You clean your heart from any kind of anger, any kind of hate, any kind of jealousy. And you just go there to the only place in the world where God said you're obligated to ascend. The only place in the world where Hashem said His divine presence is there. And you go talk to Hashem eye to eye. You thank Him for all the wonderful things you have. You share with Him your thoughts. And now we have wonderful police. They do not allow us to take any of the things that interfere with prayer. Not a sitter. You're not allowed to shake. You're not allowed to cry. All you can do is pray. True, genuine, inner spiritual prayer. And that's what you do there. Avodah shebalev. And you really just pray. All those things that bother you from praying, the shaking and all that, none of that, you're not allowed to do that. They want you to pray. That's what the police want you to do. They want you just to pray there. To stand there and really talk to Hashem genuinely, with your own words, with your own thoughts, with your own emotions. And that's what you do. And there are a lot of things when you go there that can bother you. You can spend an hour on the Har HaBayit being aggravated with so many things. You'll get aggravated at the policemen, at the situation, at the politicians, at the Arabs, at the Muslims, at the Muslim women and the men. And then you come out after an hour, and what do? You got aggravated. The other option is to put on your ears misanenet. How do you say it in English? Filters. You filter all the noise. And you go there and you don't hear anything. You're just with Hashem. And then you come out after 45 minutes, a new person. And Baruch Hashem, more and more Jews are going there. Now, it's the process. Things in our generations don't happen in one day. When Herzl established the first Zionist Congress, he did not know where Road 6 would go. He didn't even know where they would build the Intel factory. But he didn't know. But Baruch Hashem, they started, and they established different organizations, and they established the Sochnut, the Jewish agency, and other agencies, and slowly they established an army, and things happened. And believe me, you look back where we were 70 years ago and where we are today, tremendous. Baruch Hashem, we're continuing. It's not going to happen tomorrow morning, even though many people say, hey, halavai, with this Tisha B'Av, we're going to have a Beit Mikdash. We're not going to have a Beit Mikdash this Tisha B'Av, but we're getting there, step by step. And it's not going to happen from there. It's not going to happen from the leadership. It's not going to happen from the rabbis. It's going to happen grassroots. It's going to happen from more and more people coming there, and more people understanding that is the central place, the core, the infrastructure, the Even HaShtiyah of peace in the world. Leman, a special, very, very, very wonderful quote. You know that David HaMelech was a very great fan of Shlomo Karlibach. And he put inside Tehillim many of Shlomo Karlibach's songs. Like Shlomo Karlibach taught us, Leman achai v're'ai adabra na shalom bach. Leman beit Hashem Elokeinu avak shatov lach. It's really, I'm telling you, David HaMelech really had a wonderful taste. And Hashem wants us there. And the reason why people say that Sinat Chinam destroyed the Beit HaMikdash, not because it's magic, it's connected, because the whole idea of a Beit Mikdash is a house that unites. What do I mean unites? Now, we have to understand very carefully. There are two things that are opposite of a Beit Mikdash. One is a place which causes war, a place which divides. That's one opposite. There's another opposite of Beit HaMikdash, which appears already in the Parshat Noach. It's called Migdal Bavel. What happened in Migdal Bavel? Everybody thought the same way. Everybody, you know how everybody thinks the same way? How does everybody think the same way? Talk the same, how does it happen? Those of you who remember, there's a wonderful place in the world, which I love using its name. It's called the former Soviet Union. I love saying the former Soviet Union. Many of you may recall, in the Soviet Union, everybody thought alike. Because if, God forbid, you didn't think alike, you didn't think. That's all. And you weren't there anymore. So there was Nimrod who forced everybody to think alike. That's not called unity. Beit HaMikdash is a place which unites everybody like an orchestra. There's a trumpet, there's a violin, there's a piano, there are drums, and they're all playing the same music, and they're all together, and each one of them contributes to the music, to the choir. And that's what it is. The Beit HaMikdash is something that takes people to different. Why is there no more war? Because why is there war when I refer to you as somebody who threatens me? But if I refer to you as somebody who's part of the wonderful picture, and every one of you is going to look to the person sitting to his left or to his right and say, wow, you are a wonderful person. Yeah, do it right now. Okay, you can do it afterwards. You are a wonderful person. Believe me, every one of us. Hashem chose each and every one of us. And if you do it, you can't hate anybody anymore. And that's what the whole concept of Beit HaMikdash is. Something that Hashem says, I need all of you. And then there's no more Sinat Chinam, then there's Beit HaMikdash. So that's our goal, to establish a house of prayer for all nations, where no more war, because everybody's going to understand that we're all part of one mosaic. So ladies and gentlemen, if I was talking politics, I would say now anybody who wants to sign up to the Likud can, but we're not talking politics today. Anybody who wants to buy my book, which is not my book, it's a book we put out, it's cost 50 shekel in Hebrew or in English. Those of you who don't want to, you don't have to. Those of you who want to, you can. Those of you who want to join going up to Har HaBayit, thank you very much. Those of you who want to continue not going up to Har HaBayit, you can also. I love you all. Thank you very, very much for your attention. Yes, why there are people that say they're halachically you're not allowed to ascend Har HaBayit, and why was the Waqf given the authority over Har HaBayit? Did I translate them right? Perfect. Wow, I know English. Okay, anyway. Question number 1. The truth of the whole thing. This is Har HaBayit. How do we know it's Har HaBayit? We know. Just like we know this is not Paris, it's Jerusalem. We know that this is Har HaBayit. Not only do we know, luckily, 100 years before the destruction of Har HaBayit, of Beit HaMikdash, Hashem sent to this world a wonderful person named Herod, a crazy person. And he built 4 walls around Har HaBayit. He widened the original Har HaBayit, and now we know exactly where those 4 walls are. And once again, don't take things for granted. How many walls do you know in the world that are standing there for 2,000 years? A few months ago, somebody knocked on my parents' house in Beersheba, and he said, listen guys, your house is a very old house. We have to take it down, we have to build a new one. It's called Pinui Pitzui. We'll give you a much beautiful more. We're going to build a tower here. Your building is already 80 years old. So 80 years is an old building. So what do you say? These are buildings that were built now. Herod, he built many things. We know. What did Herod build? For instance, he built the port in Caesarea. What's there left? Remnants. He built a palace in Masada. What's left there? Remnants. He built Herodian. We have remnants there. There are 2 things that he built that are still standing as they were. The 4 walls around Har HaBayit and Me'arat HaMachpelah. Those are 2 things that are still standing, but Baruch Hashem, they're still standing. Anyway, so we know where Har HaBayit is. On Har HaBayit, according to Jewish law, or not on Har HaBayit, in Yerushalayim, according to Jewish law, there are 3 camps, machanot. Machane Yisrael, Machane Leviya, and Machane Shechina. Machane Yisrael is the whole city of Yerushalayim, the old city of Yerushalayim, and anybody who is a Mitzorah is not allowed in there. Anybody who's not a Mitzorah is allowed in there. Anybody here a Mitzorah? Nobody. Okay, Baruch Hashem. Those who have Tum'ah Yotzet Mehaguf are not allowed into Machane Leviya. Machane Leviya is Har HaBayit. Those who have Tum'ah Yotzet Mehaguf are not allowed on Har HaBayit. What is Tum'ah Yotzet Mehaguf? Nida, Zava, Zav, Yoledet, Baal Keri. I don't know how to say those things in English. You'll have to suffer in Hebrew. Anyway, how do you purify yourself from those things? You go to the mikveh, and then you can go on to Har HaBayit. Then there's Machane Shechina. Machane Shechina is the Azara, the Beit Mikdash itself and its courtyard, which is 4% of Har HaBayit. And there, if you're a Tmei Mit, which means anybody who was in a house when there was a dead body, anybody who was in a cemetery, anybody who touched a dead body, the only way to purify yourself from that is paraduma. So we're talking about 4% of Har HaBayit. You're not allowed to enter there. Most people today, everybody today is referred to as Tamei Met. Now, that's what the Rambam paskins. There is the Raiva that says you can go there even today because all of those laws are only from the time of Beit HaMikdash. But we go by the Rambam. So 4% of Har HaBayit, you're not allowed to go there. So many rabbis say, listen, we don't know where their 4% is, you don't go. Today, there are 4 major opinions. There's the one true opinion, and which 99% of the archaeologists and the tradition of Am Yisrael throughout history refers to the Dome of the Rock as the Holy of Holies, and from there you can measure all the measurements. There are another 3 other opinions. When we go up to Har HaBayit, we keep away from all the places which by any other opinion you're not allowed to go to. There's still 70% of Har HaBayit that you're allowed to go to. So there are those who say, listen, we don't know where it is, let's not go. I want to remind you that in 1935, the majority of the rabbis of Poland put out an announcement that it is forbidden to immigrate to Eretz Yisrael. I want to tell you another story. Until 1 year ago, you listen carefully, until 1 year ago, Mo'etzet Gdolei HaTorah, all the rabbis of the Haredi movement, Haredi community, said specifically, and that was kept for 67 years, you are not allowed to serve as a minister in the Israeli government. You're not allowed to. It was agreed upon unanimously by all the Haredi leadership. Actually, that was not exactly. Till 20 years ago was all of them. 20 years ago, Rav Ovadia Yosef changed it and said Sephardim are allowed to. And it's like Kitnias or something. And a year ago, after Bagatz said, if you can't continue being Sarah Briut and being part without being a minister, the Moetzet Gedolei Torah met together, and it's not forbidden anymore. That's the way things are. Now, Baruch Hashem, we have 300 rabbis who today support ascending Har HaBayit. But in my eyes, again, first of all, it's legitimate that there are controversial issues in Yahadut. It's probably not the first machloket, to the best of my knowledge, in Judaism. But that's the way it is. And once again, those of you who still are afraid or still don't want to, are not 100% sure, you can go talk to your rabbis and do whatever you decide. Take your conscience on yourself. Question number 2 you asked. One second, she asked the second question. Look, after the 6-Day War, we received Temple Mount surprisingly. And we really didn't know what to do. And then the decision was, listen, we don't want to get into a fight with the Muslims. They promised they will allow the Jews to ascend freely onto Har HaBayit. Let them run the mosques. Eventually, the mosques became the whole Temple Mount. Now, I want to just a few words, b'chol zot, to speak good about my prime minister, even though I don't agree with it. But basically, his policy is like this. You know, to the east of Israel, there's a small little country. It's called Jordan. It's run today by a Hashemite regime. If God forbid that Hashemite regime collapses, the other alternative is Palestinians or ISIS, and we have an interest to strengthen the Hashemite regime. The Hashemite regime has no real claim to exist. Truly, the only thing it has is that they're referred to as those who protect the holy sites for the Islam. So Israel has an interest, supposedly, to strengthen the Waqf. That's the policy. Do I agree with it? No. How will it change? Basically, my thought is that just like Zionism proved to us that when we put facts on the ground, eventually we become part of the natural view and they get used to the fact that we're here. And so too Har HaBayit. As soon as more and more people will come, they'll get used to the fact that Jews are not a nuisance, they're part of the natural view here. Yes, eventually, I've heard of this, there's a smaller outpost, it's called New York. I've heard of it. I know Baruch Hashem, things are changing. Believe me, things are changing. It'll change. Beseder. Thank you very, very much for your support. And Bezrat Hashem, we hope to see you with us. Yes, I'll take a few more questions and then I have my wife waiting for me. Yes?
A national republic.
Okay. I'll try to answer these 3 questions. First of all, about what the situation is on Har HaBayit. A few years ago, there was some digging done illegally. The Supreme Court stopped it, but it was already after 200 truckloads were dumped from there. There is a place on Har HaZeitim called Ein Tzurim, where they're sifting and they're finding wonderful things every single day, and that's over there. On the Har HaBayit itself, usually, it's under the authority of the Israeli Antiquities Authority. They don't always do what I would like them to do, but basically, yes, they are following up what's going on, and usually they're not digging anything more. Lately, there were a few cases where they were, and the police immediately arrested a few people and stopped it. In terms of the harassment that was there, I can tell you something very simple. For 6 years, there was a minister of Interior Security, which we were begging him. We said, please, remove from Har HaBayit these ladies, and majorly ladies, Murabitat, and the men, Murabitun, and take them off the Temple Mount. They are causing all the trouble. And please outlaw the Northern Islamic movement. And he told us, you guys are crazy. If we, God forbid, do that, we will begin immediately Third World War. 1.5 billion Muslims will be coming here and stop. We can't do you people have no responsibility whatsoever. A year ago, there was a new Minister of Interior Security, and we pessimistically met with him and told him the same story. Listen, take those people off the Temple Mount. These are the people that are causing the trouble. And he said, it sounds like reasonable. And he did. And he outlawed this northern Islamic movement. And he removed those people of the Temple Mount. And surprisingly, when you take the bully out of the class, there's no violence. Baruch Hashem, majorly, Har HaBayit has been much, much quieter. Hundreds and thousands of Jews have been ascending to Har HaBayit in the past year, quietly going up. I still say that the police are not allowing many things. They're not allowing us to go freely. The change will happen, as I said, grassroots. When I say individuals, in my eyes, when you have the difference between 100 and 5,000, the difference between 5,000 and 20,000, the difference between 20,000 and 100,000 is not only quantity. And these are the things that will make the change. Just like the establishment of the State of Israel, the Zionist movement, they bought another house and another dunam and another settlement. And that's the way things happen. And Baruch Hashem, we were accompanied by Hashem. What can people do aside from MKs? First of all, you can do more than MKs, because MKs are not allowed onto Har HaBayit these days. So you can go up to Har HaBayit. What will be the future? Look, I can predict. I have really a skill. I can predict anything I want in the world. I can predict anything, except for one thing: the future. It's a problem. As a matter of fact, today, sometimes we see that many of the historians have a difficulty predicting the past also, and they try to. But basically, I think that I don't know what's going to happen. I know that our goal is to turn the Har HaBayit into a world center for calling in the name of one God and uniting all nations around that. When will it happen? I don't know. You also asked me about the cameras. Netanyahu met with Abdullah, and he told him, listen, you complain that Israel is breaking the law on Har HaBayit. I offer you, I have a wonderful idea. Why don't we put cameras up here, and 24 hours a day you'll be able to see what's going on. And Abdullah said, wow, that's a wonderful idea. And Kerry and Abdullah and Netanyahu signed an agreement that there will be cameras, and Abdullah was telling the whole world, how, look, we're going to follow and we're going to see how Israel is breaking the law. A week later, the Palestinian Authority called up Abdullah and said, are you crazy? Are you out of your mind? If you put those cameras up the next day, we promise we'll break them up to pieces. And Abdullah said, why? I want everybody to see all those crimes that Israel is doing on Har HaBayit. And they explained to him very, very calmly and very clearly the way you explain things intelligently to people, that the cameras should not be put up there. And the cameras are not there. And Abdullah apologized and said, listen, I changed my mind for the time being. Ladies and gentlemen, I would love to continue here. As I said again, anybody who wants to buy the book, 50 shekel in the back. Thank you very much.